We're gonna move quickly on now because we do have a packed program, and I'm really so one of the things that I like to do with Thinking Digital and with the TED stuff that I do is that this country is blessed with an unusually talented group of people that you might call science communicators. You know, that people that have who are at the top of their respective fields in various sciences, who are taking the time, the effort to help larger populations really kind of understand the significance of their field, of their work, and why you should care to some extent. You know, that perhaps the best known in this sort of space is Brian Cox, but there are many others that are doing they're doing this kind of work in different fields. You have Helen Zursky, who's at UCL. You have Tara Shears at Liverpool University, Molly Stevens at Imperial, all in different fields, but all doing a wonderful job of making science, its history, its importance, accessible to audiences, well, to people like myself and hopefully our audience here today. So our next speaker is a woman named Danielle George. She is originally from here in Newcastle, and her mother continues to live here. And she's now based at Manchester University, where she's a professor of radio frequency engineering. And she is going to be our next speaker if Danielle is here. Danielle, would you please join us on stage?
Thanks very much, Harry. Thank you. Okay. All right, yeah, I'll stick this down here. That's fine. All right. Thanks. Okay, hi everyone. I just want to start by explaining my motivation behind this talk. So it's called Engineered in Your Imagination. And so I had a baby 9 months ago, and like all babies, forget the brightly colored plastic toys. What my baby wants to play with is the remote control for the TV and my mobile phone. And so she plays a lot with my mobile phone, and she dropped it. And I was like, oh man, I hope she hasn't broken this phone. And my friend said, well, it's okay, just if she's broken it, just get a new one, right? Because you just throw it away and buy a new one. And it made me think, wow, we take these things for granted every day because we use mobile phones pretty much every day. And it's almost like they're disposable to us. They're really powerful pieces of kit, but they're really, really disposable to us. So I got really worried that we've become really disposable with our gadgets. So I want to take you on a journey of two things that I think we take for granted every day, and that's mobile phones, smartphones, and light. And I think it's a good one to do, especially with Joseph Swan and the history in Newcastle. And also taking from two things that we use and take for granted every day, and then how you guys could actually take that to solve some of the world's big challenges that we have today. And there are real challenges we have. There are actually 14 engineering grand challenges in the world. And I'll go through a little bit of what some of them mean in a bit. But just to give a bit of background about me. So as Herb said, I'm from Newcastle. I went to a comprehensive school in Newcastle, Kenton Comprehensive School. And I was always really interested in maths and physics. I was never great at exams, by the way, but I was always really interested in maths and physics, and I really liked astronomy. And so my careers advisors said, well, you should go and do astrophysics at university. So I did, and I really enjoyed it, but I really enjoyed the practical side. So the theory is great, and it's really important, even if you think it's super boring to actually do the theoretical side of things. It's actually very, very important. But for me, the fun bit was the actual practical stuff, so actually making stuff once I'd learned the theory. And nobody ever told me that that's actually engineering. So putting maths and physics to work is engineering. And at the time, for me, it wasn't really the done thing that girls went to university to study engineering, especially not electronic engineering. Some of my friends did civil engineering and things, but really the sort of electronic side was very much a boys' thing to do. And so eventually, I worked it out with a lot of help that I should be an engineer and put my science to work in the engineering fields. And that's what I did. And the reason I did that is because I always asked why and how. And it's interesting what Herb was saying about why and how before as well. I always ask why, and I think everybody asks why. I haven't met a child that doesn't ask why all the time. And so I think we're all born scientists, and it's up to you whether you take that science forward, but everybody is capable of doing science when they're born because we're always asking this question, why? To me, engineering then becomes, you're asking why, but you're also asking how things work. So why do things work, but also how things work? And you want to try and improve them and make them better. And if you feel like that, you can solve some of the engineering grand challenges of the world. And so that's what I do as a job now. I engineer the tools for scientific discovery. And what that means is I work a lot with two big space agencies, with the North American Space Agency, NASA, and with the European Space Agency, ESA. And so I design instruments that will look into space or actually go into space themselves. So I just want to take you on a quick journey on one of the projects I've worked on. So have we all heard of the Big Bang? Yeah? Not the TV program, the actual Big Bang. So this is how the big theory is about how our universe started, is there was a Big Bang, and after that Big Bang, there was a radiation, this temperature in the whole universe. And so the whole universe is populated with this radiation. And this radiation is called the cosmic microwave background, or the CMB. And this is a picture of the universe and the cosmic microwave background. And it's a very funny thing to think that you can actually map a whole universe, but this is what it is in 2D. And so the universe is filled with this temperature, and we want to be able to explore the universe and understand this temperature because it helps us answer very key and ambitious questions in things like astrophysics, cosmology, and fundamental physics. And so it has a real sort of place in today's modern society, but also where we're going. So we want to know where we've come from, but also where we're going in terms of the universe as well. So I worked on a big instrument called Planck, and this was a spacecraft, an unmanned spacecraft, that was a big international project. So like I say, it was with ESA and NASA. And so what we have here is this gold bit in the middle here is the actual instrument itself. And it was designed at a very wide frequency range. So I worked on the 27 gigahertz and the 44 gigahertz, which was actually called the low frequency. So just to put that in perspective, your mobile phones would probably work between 900 megahertz and a couple of gigahertz. So this is much higher frequency than what we're used to on our mobile phones. And so it was, like I say, that's the instrument there, but obviously you can see there's a lot more around it that's needed to launch something in space. And it's a really scary experience working on something in space because you design something and you want it to work, and if it doesn't work, and this is quite a regular thing for me in my job, if it doesn't work first time, you can then go back to it and tinker with it and make sure it then works again. But when it's out in space, you don't really have that luxury. It has to work before it's launched. And so you're working on these things, and the things that I design are the amplifiers, because the signals that you're looking at in space are so weak, you need to amplify that signal. And so the amplifiers I work on are about 2 millimeters by 2 millimeters. They're tiny. They're very, very powerful, but they're absolutely tiny things to work on. And so you have to work in this big clean room, and everyone's sort of, you can only see people's eyes, everyone's kitted up in all of this stuff that you can't have any hair or anyone breathing on these things. And then they say, okay, and now we're going to shake it and put it under a G-force and launch it into space. And you're like, no, this is not going to work because everyone's been so careful with them so far. So it's a really scary experience. But it did work, thankfully, and it went out to a place called Lagrange point 2, which is, or L2, as it's commonly known, and L2 is out 1.5 million kilometers from Earth, so out in our solar system, 1.5 million kilometers away. And it sat there and it did what it was supposed to do. It mapped the CMB, so this radiation that we can still see from the CMB, the cosmic microwave background. So it was effectively looking back in time, nearly 14 billion years, to look at this radiation. And it did it, and it's produced the most accurate map of the universe ever. And that was a really nice experience for me to work as part of this big team, working on something like this. And when I was working on this, it was like thinking somebody must have had a huge amount of imagination to think that you could actually launch something into space and it would look back in time 14 billion years and it would produce the most accurate map ever. That's a huge amount of imagination for someone, but someone did do it and we're capable of doing it. So I just want to give you a quote from somebody else and try and guess what year this was. So this was engineered in his imagination. It will be possible to call up and talk to any telephone subscriber on the globe. An inexpensive instrument, no bigger than a watch, will enable us to hear anywhere on sea or land, speech or music delivered in some other place, however distant. In the same manner, any picture, character, drawing, or print can be transferred from one place to another. So basically, he's talking about the Apple Watch that's coming out now. It's the size of a watch. It can transfer pictures, messages across any distance. How long ago do you think that was? A few years, maybe? 115 years ago. So 115 years ago, someone had the idea of being able to do something like produce the Apple Watch. And really what he's talking about is something called wireless technology. So we use wireless every day now. And we use it because we can tap into the magic of something called the electromagnetic spectrum. Now this might be something that some of you are familiar with. What we have here is the radio spectrum in this electromagnetic spectrum. So electromagnetic spectrum is these invisible particles, so photons that have no mass. You can't see them, but we're literally sitting here today, outside, on a bus, wherever you are, you're bathing in this sea of electromagnetic waves. They're all around you all the time. And that's how our mobile phones work. And I'll come back to that in a bit. But everything we use in terms of energy is in this electromagnetic spectrum. So I work and do all of my work in the radio and the microwave spectrum, which is always funny because when I say to my friends, oh yeah, I work in microwaves, they immediately think of the microwave that you have in your kitchen. I think I can fix that, but I can't actually fix them. I can put things into space, but I can't fix the microwave. I work in radio and microwaves here. And it has literally everything we do in the modern day will sit in this electromagnetic spectrum. But it was actually first developed or demonstrated by Michael Faraday. Now, Michael Faraday demonstrated it in the 1800s, and then somebody else called James Clerk Maxwell, and if any of you are studying physics, you will know hopefully about James Clerk Maxwell, and if you don't, you will, because he had, James Clerk Maxwell produced the Maxwell's equations, which are very fundamental to many engineering and physics students. And then somebody called Heinrich Hertz, and we use his name in terms of frequency now, Hertz. He took James Clerk Maxwell's work and did a lot of practical measurements with it. But I think it's really Marconi that we think of as the father of radio waves, because he was the guy who managed to transmit a message wirelessly across the Atlantic. And that was in 1901. So a very long time ago, we were transmitting messages wirelessly from here to America. And Marconi worked a lot from another guy called Tesla. So Nikola Tesla, you might be familiar with his name with Tesla coils, electricity. And I have a great picture here of Tesla working in his laboratory. So it's a health and safety nightmare, and you definitely wouldn't be able to do this these days. But here is Tesla, and you can see all of this electricity around him being generated from here. And he's just sitting there reading his notes in the lab. And Tesla was known a lot for alternating current, or AC current, AC, as opposed to DC. So you know we use both types of electricity these days, AC and DC. But he's also known for wireless communication, wireless technology, and being able to transmit energy and light wirelessly. So I just want to take these two things, the phone and wireless communication and light, talk a bit more about them. But if we just take the mobile phone, is there any table here where somebody doesn't have a mobile phone? Everyone has a mobile phone here, yeah. Oh, there's one hand, brilliant. Yeah, you know, there's not very many people who won't have a mobile phone with them. Do you know how many mobile phones there are in the world? Any guesses? 50 billion? That's quite a lot. There are actually more mobile phones than people in the world, but maybe not 50 billion, if that's what you said there. There are 7.2 billion mobile phones in the world, but there are more mobile phones than people in the world now, and it's an incredible statistic. And we really do take it for granted that we have these mobile phones and we use them all day. But what do they actually do? Very, very briefly, what they do is we make a phone call. That call, the sound, is transmitted, so transferred into electrical energy and then transmitted via radio waves to wherever the person is that you're making that call to. And if you just took it as a point-to-point like that, it would mean that really mobile phones are just like walkie-talkies. So you might just use a walkie-talkie at home. And so to get it to work on a much more national or international scale, you have to use a cellular network. And so if you hear people use cell phones, that's why they're calling them cell phones, because you use these cells, these hexagonal things here, and each one of these has a mobile phone mast, which you'll see around lots. And so the mobile phone mast has a lot more power than your mobile phone, and so it manages to transmit your sound via an electrical wave to wherever it needs to go to. And so when you're on the move, what happens is your mobile phone is just hopping between these masts all around the country. And that's meant to be seamlessly. I travel a lot from Newcastle to Manchester on a train, and I can tell you it's not seamless, unfortunately. But it's meant to be fairly constant and uninterrupted by having all of these mobile phone masts all over the country. So that's basically how your mobile phone works. And we take for granted our mobile phone, and we know them as smartphones these days. And there are so many things your smartphone can do other than just send a text or receive a phone call. And so most of you on your smartphones will have all of these things on them already. And there are some great apps that you can design and develop yourself to do different things with these GPS receivers, with your proximity sensor. GPS receiver is our satellite receiver, the Global Link Positioning satellite receiver, and we all use that if you're on Facebook or Twitter and you tag a photo to your location. That's what you're using, your GPS receiver in your mobile phone. But things like a proximity sensor, there are some great apps that my students have been working on where they're using that proximity sensor, so how close you are to your mobile phone, to switch on and off their music on their mobile phone. Or to open their mobile phone. So if they put their hand close to it, it will open, or it will start to play music or stop playing music. And you can even use it. One guy has done it. He's a big fitness fanatic, and he wants it to count the push-ups he's doing. So he puts his mobile phone on the floor, and as he gets closer to it, it's counting how many push-ups he's doing. The accelerometer, and this would give you, if anyone's used that app where you take your mobile phone and you look into the sky and it can map what's on the sky or constellations in the sky, all the stars in the sky, that's using your accelerometer. And if you wanted a spirit level, that would be what you're using. But you can create your own apps for this smartphone. So you can crack it open and start creating things with your apps, with your phone. And this is something that we do take for granted every day. It's a very powerful piece of kit, but we do take it for granted every single day. But hopefully you can do something a bit more exciting with it. The other thing that I think we take for granted is light. And as Beth said before, Joseph Swan developed the incandescent light bulb. So that's the light bulb that has the sort of wire filament inside it, and it works by pushing electricity through it, and the filament itself has the metal has a very high melting point, and the metal glows. And so that's how the light is emitted. And that worked for over 100 years, and it was the bulb of the world, but it was actually very inefficient. So almost 90% of the energy was lost due to heat rather than light. So new lights are being developed, and many of the lights in this room will be made up of LEDs, or light-emitting diodes, and many homes are starting to get LEDs in here as well. But LEDs are slightly differently constructed in that they use quantum mechanics, or a lot of physics, to actually be produced. So these are made of two different types of materials that come together, and they have electrons in them and holes in them. And the holes are basically just broken chemical bonds. But what happens when you attach the LED, or your light-emitting diode, to a battery is that these holes and these electrons are pushed towards each other where those two materials meet. And what happens then is the electrons fill the holes, and when they fill the holes, they release light. And that just keeps happening. As the electricity from the battery moves through the material, these two things, the electrons and the holes, are pushed together, and they start releasing light. And that will just carry on and on as long as you have power, you have a battery connected. And it means that they're really low power and very, very efficient. And that's why we're all using them these days instead of the incandescent light bulb. And so scientists these days are trying to look at ways of making them even more, or even less power, even more efficient. And we do use them all the time. And has anyone done that experiment where you get potatoes or lemons and you try and light up a bulb? You must have done that. If you haven't, you should really go and do it. But basically what you do is you get a bunch of potatoes and some nails made of zinc, so that becomes your negative part of the battery, a copper coin, and that becomes the positive side of your battery. Wire it all together, wire it to an LED, a light, and via the potatoes, and it lights up the LED. And it's nice and simple. And you can do that with lemons or anything that has acid, any vegetable that has, or fruit that has acid. But one LED is very low power, and that's much different to powering something like a mobile phone. So hands up, do you think we could do this sort of experiment, but power a mobile phone, so charge a smartphone battery? Do you think that's possible? Hands up, who thinks it is possible? There's a few people. Yeah, good. It is possible. And if you Google it, there was a festival, a music festival last year or the year before that actually did this. And it needed 800 potatoes and apples to do it. But they did it, and they had a smartphone, and they charged a smartphone, just using exactly the same experiment that you do maybe at school with an LED. And there's so many other things you can do with your smartphones. So I want to end just by setting a couple of challenges for you. I want to see what fun stuff you can do with your mobile phone. So could you just take an old USB cable that's been chewed or damaged and connect it to some fairy lights and make some USB fairy lights that when you plug them into your computer and play some music, the fairy lights will dance at the same rate as the music. And it's a really easy thing to do. Could you take your phone and a magnifying glass and just a cardboard box and make a DIY projector? So put a movie on your phone and project it in your home. Again, it's a really nice, simple thing to do. Or could you take a lens from a laser pointer and your mobile phone, the camera on your mobile phone, and produce a macro lens? And this is a great one to do. If you're into your photography, with a camera, on your phone, you can't really get really close to coins or the wings of flies or whatever. With a lens from a laser pointer, you can get really, really close and actually take macro photography. And it's a really simple thing to do. So there's some challenges for you, and there's a website I can tell you about that would help you do this as well if you're interested. My last challenge is a call to action for you. Manchester, which is where I live now, is becoming the European City of Science next year. And so I want to construct the largest robot orchestra. And thankfully, the city of Manchester are going to let me do this, and the BBC want to film it. And so I've said, yes, I want to get the whole of Manchester together to do it, and lots of schools and the public to help me. And I want them to build a team or build it on your own, repurpose some old gadgets that you have, or just make a new robot. And I also said, I'm from Newcastle, I'm very proud of being from Newcastle, so I'd like to get school children involved from Newcastle as well. And so the BBC and the European City of Science people are very happy for me to do it. So I'd like some of you to think about building a robot orchestra, or part of a robot orchestra. Now this could be anything. This could be something that literally plays the drums, or the drones that we saw right at the beginning that were playing the keyboards or banging the drums themselves. Or literally just getting your old Hoover and getting the pipes from your old Hoover and creating a wind instrument from your old Hoover. Whatever it is, I would really like to hear about it. So there's my contact details there if you're interested in being part of this. And it will be a huge project. This orchestra will be filmed, and it will be around the city of Manchester. So we'll be playing, and it will be conducted by a person and hopefully a robot at the same time. And it will be around the city as well. So my very last challenge for you is going back to the engineering grand challenges, these 14 big world challenges that I spoke about. Just taking some of the fun stuff that you know about engineering now, what engineering grand challenge could you solve? Could it be you're going to enhance virtual reality, you're going to reverse engineer the brain, or engineer better medicines? Whatever it is, or engineer the tools of scientific discovery like I do, whatever it is, you've been given a really good start in life because you come from a great city. And you need to take that and move into solving some of the world challenges. So whatever it is, whatever challenge you're going to solve, make sure you have fun when you're doing it. Thank you very much. Sorry, I went on a bit too much.
That's all right. Just one quick question before we let you go, if that's all right. Obviously, you do events like this. We ran into each other in London at the TED London event. And obviously, you gave, if I remember correctly, you were only one of 6 women to ever give the Royal Institution's Christmas lecture,
right, yeah.
which was just this past year.
Yes,
That's right, yeah.
yeah.
And what is your, but then, and of course you're a new mother. So,
Yes, yeah.
And so you got all these jobs, but then there's also actually your research, right? Which I imagine you still do some of as well.
I do,
yeah.
yes.
What is that actually in? What is it, what's?
So a lot of my research is to do with wireless communication, with what I've been talking about here.
Yeah.
But so in space, developing new instruments to go into space, but also things in aerospace. So we're looking at, I work with Rolls-Royce in their jet engines and looking at improving jet engines, making them more efficient, reducing carbon emissions. And then it's really diverse. I love my job. It's so diverse. So I also work with farmers and look at precision agriculture and farming. So can we save a very precious resource in the world, which is water, which a lot of us take for granted, but actually there are a lot of people who still suffer from water scarcity in the world, and try and save that by making precision agriculture, so just using water where we need it in the fields, and so using a very simple but very similar technology to what you'd use in space, but use it for farmers as well. So it's really diverse. I love my job.
Okay, cool. And do you also work with these, you see like in movies and things, these huge fields of like radio telescopes? Or
I do,
is that
yes.
part of, oh, right.
Yeah. So there is the next generation of big telescope is something called the square kilometer array.
Yeah.
And it's literally, it will be a square kilometer's worth of collecting area. So if you imagine like a giant satellite dish, but it will actually be spread across, there'll be lots of little dishes instead, and they'll be spread across thousands of kilometers, but they'll have a core in Western Australia and in a remote area in South Africa as well. And they'll collect information. The amount of data they're going to collect is enormous. The amount of data they're going to collect will be 10 times the global internet traffic. It's huge, yeah. But it will be really sensitive, and it will actually be able to detect an airport radar on a planet 10 light years away.
Wow.
It'll be so sensitive, yeah.
So what are they looking for in all this data?
They're trying to look back in time again into the remnants of the Big Bang, but also into star and galaxy formations, and then not quite looking into the future, but seeing where we're going in the future.
Okay.
What
about extraterrestrials? Will they be looking at that?
There's a tiny amount of extraterrestrial work, but that's still something called SETI, which is the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. So that's sort of a separate project, but there will be a tiny amount going on in the SK.
Cool. Danielle, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, great.